Thanks for joining us for this look at the best original reporting from KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and coming up, private information accessed by ICE agents. KPBS investigates how sensitive databases are being improperly used by those who work for the immigration agency. The benefits of mental health intervention. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman meets a local teen who is thriving after residential treatment. And raising their own flag, the LGBTQ plus community in North County displays its pride when one city refused to do so. And we start with our ongoing coverage of San Diego's housing crisis. You can find details on the latest point in time count at kpbs.org. While the overall number of unsheltered is up, details vary by location. Tanya Thorne has some of the results from North County.
We joined Greg Angel in Escondido on an early January morning when the point-in-time count was taking place. He told us then he anticipated the data would show an increase in homelessness in the North County. And he wasn't wrong. Homelessness in Escondido jumped 67% from 2022, according to the point-in-time count data. Last year, 182 unsheltered people were counted. This year, 304.
Unfortunately, the data reaffirms what we have been seeing on the ground every day, that homelessness is increasing, and in particular, unsheltered homelessness has increased in our North County communities.
Angel is the CEO of Interfaith Community Services, the only provider of low-barrier shelters for all genders in North County. But some North County cities saw a drop in their numbers. Poway had a 91% drop, counting 23 unsheltered people in 2022 and only 2 people this year. In San Marcos, the number dropped from 12 unsheltered people last year to 2 this year. The data show coastal North County cities, Del Mar, Encinitas, Solana Beach also saw drops in their percentages. But Angel says the data is at best a rough estimate and often inaccurate. Many homeless people go unaccounted, and drops in numbers could mean there were less boots on the ground the day of the count.
The count is carried out largely by volunteers who go out at one time early in the morning. And if you don't have enough volunteers to cover a certain area, then that area is going to have a reduction in numbers.
Nonetheless, Angel says the data does help organizations and municipalities get a sense of the problem.
The point-in-time count is something that's done annually, and it raises the awareness of how many people are struggling on our streets once a year. But for most of those individuals, they're experiencing that struggle every night, every day. And it is solvable for every individual.
But the solutions require funding for wraparound services and more shelters and transitional housing, which are also part of the point-in-time count data. In total, the data shows 10,264 homeless people were counted in San Diego County. About half were in some form of shelter, and half were unsheltered. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Records show that hundreds of immigration and customs enforcement agents and contractors abused confidential databases. KPBS border reporter Gustavo Solis says those agents have access to lots of personal data.
In San Diego, one ICE agent used federal databases to spy on his ex-wife's new boyfriend. Another agent used the database to give a detainee's private information to someone who wasn't authorized to have it. Those are just a few examples of misconduct. In San Diego and Imperial counties, 26 ICE agents and contractors were investigated for this type of behavior between 2016 and 2019, records show. Most of these employees improperly used computers and databases. In fact, the most common violation was using federal law enforcement databases for self-queries, or just looking yourself up.
They might seem like low-level offenses.
David Moss is policy director at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. He says looking yourself up on a database may not seem like a big deal.
But what they do is tell a broader picture of the culture of DHS and ICE and CBP.
And that broader picture could include more serious violations, and that creates public mistrust.
People feel like they're not being watched, and they can look up whatever they want in the database. And maybe that starts with them looking up themselves, and maybe that progresses to looking up their ex-wives.
Part of what makes this so concerning for Mas is the sheer amount of personal data these databases have about us. He says they can track our movements with license plate readers. They have information about where we work and who we spend time with.
They may have like a massive amount of information. They keep ingesting more and more. It's very difficult to know the full breadth of information they have.
In fact, in 2018, some of those databases were used to track lawyers and humanitarian workers helping migrants in Tijuana. That included Nicole Ramos. She's a director of Al Otro Lado's Border Rights Project, which gives legal advice to asylum seekers trapped in Mexico. Ramos was one of the people under surveillance. Customs and Border Protection even had a dossier on her.
And that included information such as my mother's name, where she lives in the interior, my travel, including international travel that did not originate in the U.S., my car license model.
This type of surveillance has real-world consequences. Ramos first found out that something was off when CBP agents sent her to a secondary inspection.
That was when a supervisor confiscated my global entry card.
Global entry cards are vital for people who live on the border. They allow people to cross through special car and pedestrian lanes that are much faster than the general lanes. Having one of those cards is the difference between crossing the border in 30 minutes or 3 hours. Records show that some ICE agents faced little discipline after their violations were sustained. For example, that agent who used a database to spy on his ex-wife's new boyfriend, that case was not referred to management. Same thing with another agent who did a license plate search without authorization. Immigration and Customs Enforcement did not respond to a request for comment.
There is zero transparency and zero accountability.
Ramos says she's still under surveillance. She avoids crossing the border unless she absolutely has to.
People might say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to worry about. But the fact that I'm not doing anything wrong should be enough for the government to not surveil us and keep us on a watch list.
Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
And a warning about this next story, which includes a mention of self-harm. It's a look at advanced care for young people with significant mental health issues. KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman tells us how residential treatment changed one local teen's life and how it's not always available to other vulnerable kids.
15-year-old Maddie Harvey's love of music started when her grandpa bought her a ukulele a few years ago.
A year or two later, I saved up the money to buy my acoustic guitar, and I started learning that. That was a lot harder.
Maddie enjoys jam sessions with her friends from the Junior Reserve Officer Training Corps at San Marcos High School.
Ready, set, up, run.
It's there that Maddie has found her tribe.
I joined JROTC, and that, the first day I went into my flight, I was like, okay, yeah, these are going to be my people.
Maddie has done well in the program, and her instructor, Mark McLeod, says she's set to take on a leadership role with the class next year.
She comes in with energy. She puts her drive into it. She doesn't take no for an answer.
3, 2, 1.
The road to get here hasn't been easy. Maddie struggled with her mental health over the years. Her parents, Cindy and Steve Harvey, found out she had a sensory processing disorder at 5 years old.
She'd get so upset at a teacher, for example, wearing high heels, that clicking sound would drive her, crazy, and she'd, have to be excused from class, and then she'd be outside beating her head off a brick wall trying to, create any other sound besides those, high heels on the floor. So, and that was really kind of at the worst of it.
A CDC report from earlier this year says mental health among students is getting worse. In 2021, 22% of high school students reported considering suicide, and about 40% reported persistent sadness. Maddie's parents first sent her to a residential treatment center when she was in 4th grade. She ended up going 3 different times.
We were really worried about the self-harm issues, and a few trips to the hospital too. And that's when we're like, okay, we need more care.
That was tough. As a parent, you don't want to, give your child to anybody else to care for. But again, we did not have the tools necessary to get her to where she is right now.
Residential treatment is a higher level of care that sees kids staying for days, weeks, or even months at a time. At the San Diego Center for Children, it involves everything from psychiatry to counseling and therapeutic activities. CEO Moises Baron says it's a key part of care, especially for kids who may be going to the emergency room for mental health reasons.
We know that when we can provide the appropriate level of care, we're able to respond, provide what the youth and the family needs, and hopefully prevent this kind of revolving door from continuing, or a problem that could be addressed becoming more serious.
Baran says there's a gap in the system. While residential treatment is available for kids who have private insurance, referrals from schools are in the foster system, on probation, and those with welfare services, it's not available for kids who have Medi-Cal. That's the state's health plan, largely serving low-income residents.
If the child is in the hospital or in the emergency department, and the staff knows that this kid needs a high level of care, but they have Medi-Cal, that's not an option. That's not an option, and that's what needs to change.
What's changing that is a result of Assembly Bill 2317. It was signed into law last year, and it creates a new license category that will allow psychiatric residential treatment facilities to serve everyone, including kids with Medi-Cal.
We have story after story after story of success, and families that tell us, if it hadn't been for this level of care, I don't know what would have happened to my child. We want families with Medi-Cal to be able to tell the same stories.
Maddie's most recent time in residential treatment was a 7-month stay at the San Diego Center for Children. She says there, everything turned around.
I understood why this time it was the self-harm thing, and I needed to get more serious help because what was happening wasn't going to work. And then I met some really great counselors and staff, and that also deal with the same things that I deal with and have similar stories as me, and we clicked immediately.
Maddie's parents say the residential treatment has been life-changing.
That's just it, though. I mean, without the insurance that we had, or have the time, like, there's no way.
No.
I mean, she would have been in and out of hospitals every other weekend, probably.
Now, since she's out of the center, she has a good head on her shoulders and has her coping skills. It's more fun and relaxed now than what it was. It's not as eggshells. It's nice.
The future is bright for Maddie. At 15, she's looking forward to getting her first job soon and getting behind the wheel.
I can get my permit in October, and I am so excited.
Maddie says when she grows up, she wants a job that can help people. She isn't ruling out one day working at a place like the San Diego Center for Children.
Knowing that I've been there and knowing how much the center has helped people, and I know the center will still be running by the time I'm an adult. Considering how much they've helped me and other kids, I know it'll still be running. Wait, are you getting the sound right now? Oh, don't get the sound right now.
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
And if you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of suicide, you can call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988 for support, information, and for resources. The decision to raise or not to raise the pride flag this month has stirred up controversy in cities across the state. North County reporter Tanya Thorne shows us how that's playing out in Carlsbad.
Raise that flag! Raise that flag!
Members and allies of the LGBTQ+ community took it upon themselves to erect a temporary pride flag outside of Carlsbad City Hall Tuesday afternoon. The demonstration came after the Carlsbad City Council voted down the motion to fly any commemorative flags at the city's buildings last month.
This really hurt us. We also want to see the conversation changing. We're sick and tired from our elected officials comparing our struggle for human civil rights with the Pet Flag Day.
Max Dispolsti is with the North County LGBTQ Resource Center. He says the city's reason that allowing one flag could bring a flood of other flag requests was a poor excuse.
Let's have a June 19th flag. Why not? Let's have a Latino Historical Heritage Flag Day. Why not? The problem that our council, the majority council, is afraid of diversity.
Following the flag raising, the group flooded the city chambers because Dispolsti was also set to receive Carlsbad's Pride Month proclamation.
Today's Pride proclamation that we have also fought for and that was never given spontaneously or free from controversy feels like an empty promise. For the very reasons, and for these very reasons, we reject the proclamation and send it back to this council with a promise of coming back when the city will be able to address our human rights with the dignity and the respect we all deserve.
Along with the rejection of the proclamation, the North County LGBTQ Resource Center declared the city of Carlsbad to be unsafe for the LGBTQ+ community.
Queer life matters. So we appreciate your intent, but we are leaving now and we will not accept the proclamation. Thank you so much.
The group then emptied the room, leaving only a handful of people in the city chambers. Mayor Pro Tem Priya Bat Patel presented the proclamation, but understands and supports the rejection.
Across the country, people are being, they're under attack, and whatever we can do, our job is to protect, our job is to serve and make sure that everyone feels supported. And right now, I can tell you 100% that the LGBTQIA+ community does not feel supported.
She says the city council is planning on discussing raising the pride flag again next week. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
A local author is sharing his passion for writing fantasy and fairy tales with kids across Southern California. He started a book series for young readers that features characters who are daring and diverse in every way. Education reporter MG Perez tells us the story of the BIPOC hero.
John Wells III is a man on a mission, wearing a backpack and loaded with boxes of his books. On this day, he is traveling the halls of Harvest Hill STEAM Academy in Riverside County, a school of 1,300 students in TK through 8th grade. First stop is a 3rd grade classroom where Wells starts his storytelling with an unexpected personal confession.
I hated reading. I hated it.
Not to worry, that changed for Wells after he attended his first book fair in elementary school and found fantasy, the genre that inspired him most.
I did tell all the students in the 3rd grade that I had powers, superpowers.
He never lost those superpowers in his imagination, eventually motivating him to start writing as a young adult in college. There's something else about this San Diego author he wants you to know. He is part of the BIPOC community. BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. He desperately wanted to see himself represented in the pages of the books he read.
I'd always see those characters as the best friend, the comic relief, even the villain sometimes, but never as the hero. I'm telling you, Caleb, there's something weird about that guy, Tristan said.
Wells began writing the Caleb Andrews Chronicles as the COVID pandemic proceeded in 2020. In the first book, The Last Angel Warrior, we meet the hero, Caleb, a 16-year-old adopted biracial teenager struggling with his identity. There are 2 more books now that Wells reads to children who can see themselves in the story.
It's so important for us to continue to stand out, stand up, and show the world that, hey, we're here, we matter, our stories matter, our representation matters.
The message is being received by students like 9-year-old Creed Abrams.
Books like this inspire me to, let's say, do different things and think about it a little bit more.
I like to read anime books, fantasy books, kind of romance books a little bit.
9-year-old Jada Brooks is another 3rd grader who sees herself in the pages of The Angel Warrior.
And I like that part in the book where they find this stranger in a dark alley. It kind of adds up and gives the book a little something something.
John Wells keeps reading and writing.
The stranger looked at me with terror in his eyes.
He plans another 4 books in the Caleb Chronicles series, and he's adding more diversity in characters, along with another letter from the alphabet.
Q stands for queer. So queer, Black or Indigenous, people of color.
Harvest Hill STEAM Academy is home to students of several ethnic and economic backgrounds. They are also survivors of the COVID shutdowns and learning loss. Principal Phil Suttner agrees that escape through fantasy books helps in healing.
A lot of our kids suffered greatly during that time, not just from the seclusion and, being out of school, but a lot of them endured trauma. They lost loved ones and they had a lot of things happen to them that shouldn't happen to kids.
Before I heard the sound of footsteps, as if someone were walking behind me, everyone go this.
Wells is happy to help in the healing through his series of books that will end in a meaningful way.
I won't call it happy and I won't call it sad, but I will say that the ending that is planned is the ending that the story requires.
That is the last word for now.
That's the end of the chapter.
MG Perez, KPBS News.
And for more of our content, you can just find us on YouTube. The KPBS page has content from our newsroom and original shows like Crossing South and Ken Kramer's About San Diego. It's also where we live stream KPBS Evening Edition weeknights at 5. You can subscribe and get notifications when new videos are posted. Well, here are some of the most popular stories this week at KPBS.org. Race and equity reporter Katie Hyson has a story on numbers that show Black San Diegans are more likely to be stopped for biking and walking infractions. Investigative reporter Scott Rodd updates us on SDPD's inventory of surveillance equipment that's being made public. And there's a lot of response to our audience call out, are you recycling your food waste? You can let us know at KPBS.org. A neighborhood in Rancho Bernardo that was damaged by wildfire more than a decade ago got a bit of closure this week. KPBS reporter Kitty Alvarado was there as long overdue street repairs were finally made.
3, 2, 1. Yes!
San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria gave the countdown to signal work crews to start their engines.
Get to work, everybody.
The noisy construction was met with cheers from people who live in Rancho Bernardo's Westwood neighborhood. The roads are crumbling and have been cracked for so long, there's grass and flowers growing in the middle of the street. The Witch Creek fire destroyed the roads in 2007.
We are going to be ready. Our fire department, our emergency services will be ready so that this never happens again, because look, here we are still 15 years later fixing roads that melted in the flames.
Eduardo and Aurora Arcilia have owned a home here for 20 years. Their home was still standing when they returned.
It broke my heart because all the houses here on this row were burned up, were down. About 24 over here, and it was really devastating.
Fred and Carol Gam feel like most people do in this neighborhood.
Well, I'm glad to see they're doing something finally, but it took an awful long time.
Ricardo Marquis, a water tender operator working on the street repairs, was also affected by the fires.
We had to evacuate, so we left the house for almost a week.
He's proud that he's part of these repairs because he was also part of the team that supplied the water to put out the fires. 2 people were killed in the fire, and dozens of firefighters were hurt. Gusts of winds were clocked at 100 miles an hour that October day, making the Witch Creek fire deadly and one of the most destructive in the state's history. It was fast, erratic, and devoured everything in its path.
We never thought it would jump, a 10-lane freeway?
Diane Ron lives just down the street from the Gams. She's among the more than 1,100 people who lost their homes in the fire.
It's still hard to think about it. We got through it.
Her home was rebuilt, but the trauma is still there.
It's all the ash, just chimney, that was all that was left.
She can't help but get upset by today's press conference where city leaders spoke about the work it took to get $5 million in funding for repairs.
It's a laugh to that the Witch Creek fire repairs. Everyone's repaired already. It's the city who's lagging so far behind.
But she finds comfort in what wasn't lost.
My daughter got out. The dog got out.
The city says the repair work will be done by the end of the month. Kitty Alvarado, KPBS News.
Well, we can't go without checking in on the San Diego County Fair. This is the first weekend with this year's theme, Get Out There. And that is exactly what Alexander Wynn did for opening day.
This is the first day of the San Diego County Fair, and the theme this year is Get Out There. It's all about exploring the natural wonder of our state. And throughout the fair, there are decorations depicting scenes from California state parks. The day started with a ribbon cutting
on the count of 3. 1.
And Chula Vista's Hilltop High School Band and Color Guard welcoming guests to the 139th Annual San Diego County Fair. For the Lopez family, attending the fair's first day is a family tradition.
The boys are excited about it, and it's the first year I feel like they're actually going to enjoy it and remember it.
But what the Lopez boys are looking forward to most are the rides. And there are plenty of them at the fair. There are 2 new additions this year, the Medusa and Joker. The Buswells were the first to ride the Medusa.
It was really nerve-wracking because it was really high up. It was fun though.
Over the Joker 360, Chase Copen and Johnny Keating had a blast being swung around.
It looked fun. It was lots of fun.
Yeah, it went upside down. So
it went upside down, so we figured it would be fun.
But the fair would not be complete without fair food. There are your staples, corn and turkey legs, and of course, new concoctions by Chicken Charlie.
Every year we got to try to outdo the year before, and this year we got fried s'mores on a stick. Basically, it's jumbo marshmallows on a stick. We put a whole lot of chocolate fudge on them, and then we roll that into diced up graham crackers. We dip that in batter, fry it, and then top it off with more of all those toppings.
This perfectly matches this year's theme to explore the great outdoors. In the exhibit hall, park rangers will guide you through some of California's natural wonders. And if you need to get away from getting out there, head to Destination Unknown, one of the 2 speakeasies at the fair this year. If you want to get out here, you should plan ahead and get your tickets early. Fair officials are capping attendance at 60,000 guests per day. At the San Diego County Fair, Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
We hope that you enjoyed this look at KPBS News this week. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Thanks for joining us.